Hello, dear friends. Today, I would like to focus on one more question that was asked. The question concerns 1% of consciousness that have already been engaged in the development of their intelligence as the main task of evolutionary development. And the question concerns what will happen next with this 1%, and whether it concerns the question of moving to the next stage, when the mind must surrender to the higher consciousness. Of course, this is a rather complicated question. It may not even be as complicated as it is voluminous. Therefore, in a short video it is impossible to fully tell what concerns the evolutionary development of consciousness. But as far as possible, I will try to briefly explain some points. At the same time, I also pay special attention to the fact that watching our videos, a separate category of psychologists also ask certain questions. And some of them think that this doesn't quite suit them. Yes, it is interesting, but specifically in their practice, they can apply little of what they have already listened to from us. Just here I would say that this is not quite the right understanding among such psychologists. Because those psychologists who work at the intersection of modern psychology and esotericism are still much more successful, precisely because they already understand the laws of development more. Based on this, it is better to understand what is happening to each person. I have already noticed that nothing happens just like that in life. One way or another, everything is connected with the evolutionary growth of consciousness. And I also have to work with many psychologists who come to me with their problems. And it is necessary to deal with their problems, taking into account their point of evolution. And they also begin to understand that the knowledge that we are talking about here is not useless, and they are needed for further professional growth. I pay special attention to this. And we must also understand that psychologists are people with certain professional skills. And they are not saints either. They also have a lot to go through in their lives. If they build their independent development more competently and work more competently, including working with people, taking into account exactly the point of human evolution, taking into account what a person already managed, what needs to be further focused on, it will certainly help to improve their professional skills. And our school is designed to ensure that those specialists who already work with people and help people well can further improve their professional skills. So you also do not have to make premature conclusions, as something will fit in your head. And the knowledge we are talking about will also be better understood. And this will help not only to build your professional life more competently, it will also help in building professional skills. And now let's talk about 1% of consciousness. This is a category of people who already have the focus of consciousness on a specific mental. Or in other words, this is the main task, which was to develop intelligence or the thinking processes. This 1% of consciousness, we can say that 1% of consciousness is not much. But if we pay attention to the fact that 60 billion consciousness are developing in our system, then 1% of this number is quite a lot of people. And here again, we must take into account that only a part of them is in incarnation in our world. The rest are, in other words, and therefore a relation to the total number of people who currently live in our world. This 1% is a few people who, as we said, determine the current state of a person in a form of technological progress. And even this 1% of consciousness, it is also very heterogeneous. From those who have only recently started working on improving their intelligence, and to those who are already approaching the completion of individualization, and are ready to storm the border between a concrete mental and an abstract mental. And here I will remind you that concrete mental also refers to the state of personal development. Abstract mental is already a spiritual state of a person. This is what concerns his higher consciousness. On this abstract mental, there is just the higher self of a person. And so, in the process of development, I have already paid attention to this before, of all times and peoples, what they are striving for by doing their practices. They strive precisely to connect their consciousness with their higher consciousness, and above all, to connect with their higher self. And so the first light that spreads inside a person is just the light of consciousness, of his higher self. And then a certain goal of these activities becomes achieved. But before this can happen, the mind must surrender to this higher self. By this time, he had already developed quite well. And here I would like to draw attention to the fact that when a person is on this very verge of moving to the next stage of development, on an abstract mental, then this is the state of completion of development for the sixth race of mankind. It is the task of the sixth race of humanity to break the boundary between the concrete mental and the abstract mental. This is to connect with your spiritual beginning, to connect with your higher self. And so just this stage in development is the most difficult for a person, because at this stage a certain amount of egoism still continues to work, a certain amount of ambition continues to work, and the mind, which is used to being the main thing in personality, it is very difficult for it to become under the guidance of a higher consciousness. Sometimes I have to deal with some of our students who haven't reached such a milestone, are just going through this process of resistance, and some believe, yes, I am as a person in this world. I understand better what is happening here, what is needed, and the higher self doesn't understand me. It doesn't fully know what is happening here, what is happening to me. The higher self, it has already passed these stages a long time ago. It knows how and what is happening in life, how development is going on. Naturally, it tries to use first of all its own experience, in order to help the young consciousness overcome this very difficult stage of its development. And only when finally the young consciousness realizes that it will not be able to advance further on its own, that it needs to adopt the experience of older entities. And the higher self is this older entity, which has tremendous experience, and therefore it is necessary to accept and really need to adopt this example and adopt. Learn and learn from these older entities. And I can remind you of the famous movie about Odysseus. When Odysseus, the hero of the Trojan War, was returning home, he was revered as a hero, and then he got into a storm, and for 20 years storm carried him back and forth across the small Aegean Sea, and he couldn't get through to any shore in any way. And when finally he cried out to the gods, for what? So there was a big wave, on which was the face of Poseidon. And the hero shouts to Poseidon, "What is going on?" Poseidon's response, "You have to understand." So what should I understand? You must understand that without the gods you are nothing. And that is when finally it dawned on Odysseus that without the gods he is nobody. That is when the storm stopped, everything calmed down, and he was washed ashore. This is just a very good example of how, at such a stage of development, it is finally possible for a consciousness that is used to being a leader, using to being the main one, to merge with the highest. Finally, it comes to the point that nothing further can happen without a higher consciousness. Therefore, it is necessary to belittle your pride, remove it, so that it doesn't interfere with further learning, learning and learning, to adopt experience from older entities. And then this boundary is blurred, and then there is a normal development of consciousness, a normal level of development. With what? I congratulate you. Perhaps at some time you will already be able to consciously cross this border. I wish you great success.